Good morning. I would like to greet you for this another event of ours from the APD, Agro-Political Dialogue. My name is Ingo Mechas. I'm the director of APD, and we are an instrument, a tool of technical interchange and political interchange between Germany and Brazil, involving also matters such as the EU, as we can see today, the anti-deforestation law of the European Union. I would like to greet you all today, and I would like to say that yesterday we had a very laborful day. We discussed with technicians of the private sector of the Brazilian and the German government. Both private sectors came together and we discussed relevant matters as to the technical implementation of the EUDR. And in a couple of minutes, we will hear a bit of a collection of everything that was said and conquered together yesterday. And I would like to highlight the participation of the Brazilian government here, Pedro Neto. Jan Berner from the University of Bonn is also here. This is the institution that helped us to put this event forward. I would like to highlight the presence here of Fernando Sampaio from the Brazilian Beef Exporters Association. André Nassar is also here from the Brazilian Association Vegetable Oil Industries. And we have here Jan Berner and Fernanda Martinelli from the University of Bonn, and many others that are here with us today from the civil society. I would like also to highlight the participation online from Mr. Thomas Balzauf with the Federal Ministry of Food and Agriculture in Germany, and Tobias Fear with the Meat Industry Association in Germany. Thank you so much for being here today. And thus, with this introductory words, I would like to give the floor to our moderator today, my dear friend Carlos Alberto from our institution APD. Thank you so much. Thank you very much, Ingo. Good morning to all of our participants online and on site. We will have 2 hours of discussion till noon Brazilian time. And as we heard from Ingo, this day-to-day continues the work that we started yesterday with 25 experts and representatives of the private sector, third sector, university, and the government from Germany and Brazil, representing also the EU. And there were many participants yesterday that interacted with us per video. We will start by giving the floor to Mr. Jan Bonner and Fernanda Martinelli from the University of Bonn. They are from the Institute of Development there. And we will hear from them a summary of the conclusions of yesterday. And then we will have 2 panels with our guests so that we can reflect and discuss the solutions and the work that we did yesterday according to what we discussed in the realm of the implementation of the EUDR, especially regarding cattle and soy. And we will have also time for the interaction of participants on site and online. So without further ado, I would like to give the floor to Fernanda and Ian, and they will lead the discussions. Yeah, good morning and good afternoon to Germany. I would like to thank Carlos, and we would like to resume and summarize the discussions of yesterday. I was part of the group discussing soy. Fernanda was part of the group discussing cattle. And we had participants also from the University of Brasilia. And here is a summary of our conclusions. So we discussed about the challenges and related solutions regarding the need of compliance with the EUDR requirements, focusing in those two value chains, beef and soy. And I would like to start by saying that we had a very interesting discussion of both groups, and all participants highlighted that there are many doubts still on the format and type of documentation that will be needed by the institutions in the EU. For instance, what is the level of negligible risk? How anonymized should be the chain of custody, the matter of data, how to prepare the legal documents, all things that we know already, but they were also tackled yesterday. In the group of soy that I will present to you, we had 4 challenges discussed yesterday, and I believe that they're all they hang all together. They express the need of alignment of logistics and accessibility. So I would like to tackle the first challenge, that we have indirect suppliers, so that the big the main there is a main tendency to verticalize the value chain, because operators, of course, want to minimize risks and transaction costs. And they would like to have, of course, the EU would like to have, of course, more control on everything. So when we have indirect partners, the question is, how will I get the information from the indirect operator, the indirect stakeholder? So what we discussed yesterday has to do, well, the proposed solution was to expand on the national data platform, Agro Plus is called, and the proposed solution is that this platform would provide producers with proofs of legality, for instance, with QR codes, and that would be given to individual producers at 0 cost. And it could also provide, of course, information necessary for due diligence for the operators. So the operator would then have the due diligence. I will come back to this when I get to my third point. But the second point that we discussed has to do, and we saw this in the presentation of Felipe yesterday, that there are inconsistencies and in the quality of information on deforestation forest cover. So one system could say that a property has 65% wooded land, and another system would point at some other figure. So we ask ourselves, how could we standardize the quality of information? And how could we bring alternative systems together? So the proposed solution that was discussed yesterday, is that national authorities that are competent and the EU could accept national reference databases, for instance, PRODES or map biomas. These are specific, they're very accurate, and they have scientific proof of higher classification accuracy. We heard this also from the colleague from MAPA. Some other systems could be improved, but they could also serve as references for the EU. The third point has to do with data sharing along the value chain. The question there, or the issue there, is how can we pass information forward? How can information be streamlined? And how can we anonymize personal information to be passed on at higher levels? So in Brazil, for instance, we have coordinates of a production area. Normally, there is the name of the producer associated to that information. So one proposed solution was that to develop data containers at shipment level. They would contain the information um, regarding, for instance, deforestation-free plots of lands, but that the data remains disguised for most operators. When the data container reaches the competent authority in the EU will have the right information, the disguise, the open information, which will then guarantee that one operator can put forward this information and use this information. Finally, we discussed other legality risks, including that have to abide by the national legislation. And again, the platform that MAPA is developing today could provide a legality statement at property level and could, for instance, state that there is no illegality in that property. And this could be passed on by the producer when this producer sells soy to the operator. So the question that we had is this sufficient to prove the legality and the conformity regarding the EU? Now I'd like to give the floor to Fernanda, and she will say something about the working group on beef. So the matters regarding the value chain of beef very similar to those that we heard from the working group soy. So I would like to briefly pass on the discussions that we had in our group, but the key word in beef is integration and availability of data. So the first bottleneck that we saw in traceability of the beef chain is the lack of a complete system of information that will offer traceability of the whole cycle of the life of the animals, which is, of course, what the EUDR wants. The most information that are available is concentrated at the end of the life of the animal. So the lack of this system enhances the insecurity on the contamination of those animals because there are many producers that raise cattle at the frontier of the Amazon, and they're not included in the system. So there are many risks associated to the absence of information that could lead to the exclusion of small farmers of the markets of the EU. So one of the solutions that we elaborated yesterday to combat this lack of information would be to support small producers to generate the required data and implement an information system for the initial stages of the value chain. The related costs should not be borne just by producers alone, but should be distributed along the supply chain, or they should require an external support. We should establish together some mechanisms for that, but of course, mechanisms of incentive are also welcome. So we need to integrate data. This is something that we saw yesterday. The official information at different stages of the value chain, there is still fragmented. So the lack of integration of data and of the analysis of data is one of the main challenges that we see, especially at the beginning of the chain. So of course, if we don't have the information on the producers, then operators will not be able to abide by due diligence. So the traceability by batch rather than an individual traceability would help. And we have to see how negligible risk will be defined by the EUDR.
So we can use platforms, public databases, as mentioned by my colleague. We have to improve legal conformity so that it is reliable. Another solution would be to increase the regional data all over Brazil and digitalize the different links of the supply chain, promoting new tools to create and make available high-level data. So this is a wrap up of our discussion, the main topics we discussed. Thank you. Thank you, Fernanda and Jan. So we have, with this short introduction, and the intention is to have a discussion, and you might have noticed that the debate is about data reliability, traceability, standardization, integration, security, how we can achieve this so that the importers are confident that the things coming to the EU are not linked to deforestation. So we have some changes here. And today we want to have two panels, but with a lot of integrations, because we don't want to discuss in detail everything we discussed yesterday, but we would like to reach some conclusions. So we will have representative of the private sectors from both countries, Fernando Sampaio, from the from ABIEC, Brazilian Associations of Meat, and then we have ABIOF, which is Vegetable Oil Association, and then we have Tobias Freer from VDF, German Meat Association. So this is importers and exporters. We will also have government representative, Thomas Waldorf of the BML, the Federal Ministry of Food and Agriculture, and Pedro Neto from MAPA and the Department SDE. But we would like to have a great interaction, all very dynamic, and we would also like to involve the audience. So let's get started. And I would like to suggest we start with Brazil, then Germany, and vice versa. And the question is, so Andrea, Tobias, Fernando, considering the gaps that were presented, what kind of strategies and approaches you consider to overcome these gaps, the difficulties we still have, because we have to bear in mind that there is a cut day, the end of the year. This is the first question, thinking of the exporters, but also considering the possibility for the importers and exporters that you can make suggestions. Yesterday, several questions were discussed. What could be improved? What could be better to overcome the gaps? So the balance is there are huge efforts from exporters from Brazil, but it also depends from Brussels, from the European Union. So we saw in the summary that the platform Agro Plus, and the program Brasil Mais Sustentável, Agro Mais Sustentável, more sustainable agriculture. At another moment, we will discuss this with our partner from the German ministry. But maybe we get started with these two topics, and I'll have to control the time. So you get 3 minutes, please. 3 minutes for the two questions. Just 3 minutes. 3 minutes, then maybe you can come back and come back again. So let's see. Thank you. We had the discussion yesterday, lots of discussions. And when we talk about the cattle value chain, it's three products we have in legislations. It's raw meat, processed meat, and it's leather. We have the leather industry. Ricardo is representing this industry, but for the three value chains, we have the same challenges. Raw meat, our production for Europe, we already have segregation due to sanitary control necessities. So we know exactly what we are exporting to Europe. So these animals are 100% identified, and this won't change because we have the same requirements. So here we have segregation. We have this kind of control of the animals, but due to sanitary reasons. So the ear tag or the manual identification is made 90 days prior to slaughter. And this is what Europe demands or requires for sanitary reasons. Now it's environmental. So we have to give guarantees, sanitary guarantees, but also traceability system beyond this. So it's social environmental. The meat packers also have practices, controls for sanitary reasons and criteria for deforestation, slave work. So we can satellite images, we have data crossing, and we really fulfill the legislation. So what is the gap? The gap we discussed yesterday. How can I have it over the whole chain? Now I have it for 90 days. What I can deliver to my importer is this kind of control. 90 days. So I need a transition period to have it over the entire life cycle and the entire chain. And if we don't have this transition period at the end of this year, we will have the volumes to export. And the European consumer will suffer. We had this 2008. We had a list of farms that could export and others that could not. The volumes went down, prices rose, and you had to eat horse meat in Europe because you didn't have other kinds of meat in Europe. So to avoid this kind of shock at the beginning, we need a transition period or any kind of transition so we can extend the traceability. So now raw meat, processed meat and leather, we don't have this kind of segregation because the material can come from any farm, so it's more complex. We have controls of the farms offering the raw material to the meat packers, but it's the same challenge. We don't have the control for the entire value chain. We can use existing information of sanitary controls. Yes, we can do that, but this kind of information is not public and it's not always accessible. So we have a proposal how we can use this kind of information to fulfill EUDR requirements. This is being analyzed, but we understand we have to still work on it, improve it, so that we have the controls we really need. And maybe we can solve this in regions with a lower risk. So it's specific requirements. It's a transition for raw meat to extend it over the whole value chain and life cycle, and to also improve the GTA. It's the permit for animal transportation. Fernando, another question. You say we need transition period. So we have the whole life cycle of the cattle. So you'd suggest that the time till the end of the year is not sufficient. We ask that the implementation day should be further on, or it should not come into force. December, January next year, what we can deliver is fulfillment of EUDR, but just partially, not completely, for the entire value chain. So this is a doubt we have to the European authority. I can tell Tobias, for example, our importer, I will sell you this way, but I can give it to you in January with these standards, but he won't know if this is sufficient. And the European authority also want to that the importers have to accept all the risks. And we also have to think of the smallholders in Brazil. Now we'll give the floor to Tobias. Tobias, you represent the importers. Fernando, the exporters, and he is saying that we will have problems with the raw meat. Negative impact, we had examples in the past, so he asked you directly, what should we do? What can we do? What can the European Union do, the importers do, the ministries on local and national level? So we mitigate this risk, because we might have problems on the level of the consumer market. And reminding our audience that might not be so familiar with the EUDR, this affects importers of the European Union. It's not a law that it's from Brazil, but it has impacts, and especially for the importers. So it's implementation problems, regularization problems. So what's your opinion, and especially what can importers do? Thank you for participating at our event, and also, of course, Thomas Baldorf. Everyone is important, and we thank you. Please.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. I think you raised a very good point in the very beginning. You mentioned that it is especially important for the importers. I would also remind everyone that this EUDR has an effect on the whole chain, not just the importers, not just European exporters, even European producers are affected by the EUDR. And there's, as you say, our whole chain is currently very worried, very nervous about the implementations, because there's simply a lot of unknowns still. When Fernando, for example, you as an exporter asked me, as an importer, what do you want from me in the future? A lot of the times our importers just don't have the concrete enough information yet to give you the answers. The fundamental goals of the EUDR are very clear. However, the practical implications for certain chains, for specific chains such as the beef chain, still are being worked on. And as you've mentioned before, time is running very short now. It's only a few months left, and our importers need to come to grips and get the information that they need to tell their exporters, this is what we need from you. And in the end, there's also already many systems, very impressive systems being developed, such as in Brazil, also in other places. We need to have an exchange with our local authorities that these systems are going to be accepted, and that these systems are not just going to be accepted in Germany or the Netherlands, that they're going to be accepted in all of our 27 EU member states in the same way. As you said, it is very important to avoid a trade in the break flow, a break in the trade flow for us. And therefore, we see that countries need time to implement their systems. As I said, a lot of things are being worked on, a lot of things are growing, but as we expect, they're not going to be perfect from the very beginning. As I mentioned before, we ourselves are still working on systems to implement here in Germany. And it is a long road still ahead to have a workable and functioning system. So if you speak of a transition period or an extension of the transition period, I think it is very worth considering allowing these systems time to grow and also correcting them as they could become operational, and not setting a hard cutoff date. This day you're in, next day you're out. it is also what we're still facing is a somewhat limited awareness along the whole supply chain of the impacts that the EUDR will have. It is, as you said, the whole chain needs to work on a solution here, and in the end, it may be not the full set of information available to the farmers at the beginning of the supply chain or even the end of the supply chain. And therefore, as I said, in the end, it comes down to that we need to give those systems time to grow, the solutions time to grow. And in the end, we also need to have the level playing field that is being targeted within the EU. We need to ensure that we have a uniform application of the EUDR across every member state of the EU. It cannot be that the EUDR causes problems or is enforced very strictly in Germany or other member states and less strictly in others. That is a huge problem for exporters. They don't know with who to trade with anymore. It is especially a big problem for importers in that sense. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tobias, for your contribution. Nassar, Tobias just mentioned that importers and the whole chain is very nervous and preoccupied. And how do you sense it? Are we also nervous? What would you say, Nassar? Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to congratulate you and congratulate Jan for the summary that he offered from the debates that we had yesterday. And we identified loopholes and gaps that are very important. Well, I had one vision before of the debate yesterday, and today I learned, and yesterday I learned about the consequences that I see in the Brazilian side. And I will try to tackle this in 3 minutes. On the Brazilian side, we see that a segregation is a very important matter. The importer, the trader will have to set out routes of importation, and that will lead to the verticalization of the chain, because of course he wants to diminish the risk of control of that product. So that is the first consequence that I see. The second consequence, to manage many small farms is much more costly than to manage a few big farms because of the need to control and geolocation. So that could lead, of course, to the reduction of the number of suppliers bound to the EU. And that would be a very severe effect of the legislation. A verticalization effect can also exclude indirect partners, cooperatives, resellers, and elevators, which would be another negative consequence, because if this enterprises do not have control of the origin and cannot guarantee segregation, they will be excluded from the route of exportation. We have also a problem at the exporter side, because the exporter had plenty of suppliers, and the importer will not have that many suppliers. So they will have less importers. That will have an impact on the price of the product, and this is also a bad consequence. And I would like to conclude, segregation has greater impacts in places like Brazil and lesser impacts in the United States and Argentina, because those are countries that don't have any problems with deforestation anymore and conversion. So that could lead to a shift of suppliers to Europe, not regarding regions in Brazil, but an enhancement of participation of Argentina and the US, and less participation of Brazil. This is an analysis I'm making from the consequences that I see. For the operators and for the European countries that buy our soy. How do I see it from their perspective? Of course, they are preoccupied because they see a restriction on the side of supply. They see that if Brazil cannot meet the regulation, Brazil will not be one of the main suppliers. Europe has Argentina, Paraguay, the US, and Brazil. But if if Brazil offers a higher risk and I have liability as an importer, I would like, the European will say, I would like to reduce my risk. So that will lead to the tendency of competition between operators in Europe itself. They will have to organize so that there won't be any break in the commercial chain. So we see market consequences. The discussion yesterday pointed out solutions to mitigate this, but I guess we can talk about the solutions later. Thank you, Andre, for your contribution. Andre is right. Yesterday, we had the possibility to talk about this the whole day and to advance the discussion, and Andre tackled this very clearly. He sees changes in the market as a consequence of the implementation of the EUDR, verticalization, costs, exclusion of small farmers, and more competition with the loss of Brazil comparing to other competitors, Argentina, for instance, and Paraguay also. Tobias Fear and Fernando Sampaio talked about transition, and I would like to call Thomas Baldauf at this point with the Federal Ministry of Food and Agriculture. Thomas, by seeing that you were with us yesterday, how could you contribute to this discussion? What do you say about transition? What will be this? We have a horizon next year, and the demand for more flexibility and the time gradual implementation, 2-3 years. This is something that has been discussed often, but we don't see much space for this in the law. What can you say about this and about the effects, the economic effects, macroeconomic effects, and the shift of the market, of course, with additional costs that will reach the final consumer? Thank you, Thomas, for your participation and for being here these 2 days. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you very much for having me, and I hope you can hear me well. First of all, and this is really crucial, I would like to underline also that yesterday's discussion, how far I could follow them due to the time difference, that the exchange was really in a very friendly and open orientation and friendly atmosphere, and that the mode of work was really on finding solutions to this complex issue that we have been working on. And I think Jan Börner put it really very well yesterday when he said we now try to put the pieces together that are there. So I think the identification of some of those uncertainties and challenges are absolutely valid that we have heard yesterday and today. And absolutely with the processes like, for example, this Brazilian-German agriculture policy dialogue, which is really relevant and important in these times currently, they can contribute to find those respective answers to those challenges. I'm absolutely sure. You asked something about the timing, and I heard this yesterday as well. So perhaps, first of all, I think timing is really crucial and partly absolutely also problematic. This is true both for any implementation process like the EUDR, like this EU deforestation regulation, and at the same time for the fight against deforestation. I think this workshop clearly, those two workshops clearly showed also an accelerated pace in the development on the fight of deforestation. And absolutely, I think all of us are clear that the remaining 10 months will be quite intense to prepare on the implementation and application of this regulation for everyone who will be the operator by end of the year or beginning of next year. So perhaps I don't want to pre-emphasize already what my colleague from the Brazilian government, Pedro Neto, will say, but absolutely I want to underline that the current government in Brazil really makes a huge use of being far ahead in technical solutions. We have seen this yesterday as well in this Agro Brazil Sustainable Plus system. And I think it's really important, not only for complying with any supply chains to the EU, but also in terms of a global impact. This is really impressive. It's not only static, there will be several levels, and it's really far ahead of everything I have seen for this. So generally, I think this system is absolutely usable for applying major parts of the EUDR already, and small technical tweaks need to be well developed and just adapted for fully complying with the EUDR. This is absolutely true for well, using to comply with those additional burdens that are there. One of the main issues I would say that we really also need to address, and I heard this both from both rapporteurs for the working groups, is that we need to promote the partaking and involvement of all stakeholders on the German side and the Brazilian side. And I think, again, this workshop here, those two workshops are really crucial for this. But also for future, I think now comes the time where those crucial elements are identified, that we need to define ways to link those valuable systems like the one we had seen yesterday and perhaps we'll see right now from Pedro Neto, those valuable systems that are there to those systems for the operators, who are the prime actors. I think that needs to be underlined again within the scope of the application of the EUDR. So I really see great opportunity for the private sector on both sides, both in Brazil and in Germany here to cooperate and find those solutions that are needed in the remaining 10 months. And absolutely, there are differences between those two groups we have seen, but we, from our side, we really had good experience and good prospects on those cross-learning possibilities that we have seen from different sectors. I think I will leave it with that as a first glimpse on the outlook. And any further questions, of course, I'm happy to take them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Thomas. Yes, please keep us with us. We will have other questions for you. You have been accompanying the process. You've been seeing the process. We've been talking about this for 2 years now. We had trips, delegations to Germany, many activities. So I can say that the speed in this debate is very high. 1 year ago, there was still a little bit of negation of this whole status quo, but from that point on, we have managed to discuss pragmatically. As we heard from André Nassar, we had processes that we can put into March and that can tackle those problems, the verticalization, exclusion of small farmers. We have here the participation of Pedro Neto from the Ministry of Agriculture and Livestock. Pedro Neto was already with us in other times. He spoke publicly at some point in the past about the new system that was developed or is in development. And we had a surprise to see that the system is already very advanced. The technology enterprise in Brazil managed to tackle the problems. And we see the Ministry of Agriculture in the forefront of these developments. We see also the participation of the private sector and of civil society in the system. So Pedro, I would like for you to say some words on uncertainties and difficulties regarding information and how the platform can be a way to give us answers. As we heard from a colleague from the ministry in Germany, he says he hopes that this system is a reference in our debate as compared to other countries. Thank you, Pedro, for your time here.
Hello, good afternoon, good morning, depending on where you are. Thank you for participating. And sorry for not being there yesterday, but I had a huge feedback, good feedback from the responsible department in my Ministry of Normatization of the platform AgroMais, the sustainable agriculture. And I would like to start my explanation and also thank you for the opportunity. Say hello to Thomas Waldorf in Germany. We are colleagues in Ministry of Agriculture. So what was the main driver motivation for the Brazilian government to tackle this discussion and start the platform? So we would like to have a favorable atmosphere, favorable climate for agro business here in Brazil, as well all over the world. And our idea is, our vision is that we have new requirements in the markets here and abroad. And EUDR just materialized this tendency by means of legislation. So we just had to speed up our work to have better tools, better instruments to overcome the loopholes, because we have databases, but they are not integrated. And as my colleague, our moderator already mentions, he wants me to speak about the uncertainties. I won't do that. I will talk about the certainties, what we are certain of, because Brazil is one of the countries where we have a lot of opening. We are transparent about the changes in our ecosystems. We have warning systems, we have monitoring systems for deforestation. All this is regularly published. It's accessible, you can check it. And the value chains, the beef value chain and soy chains, they use this because they want to prepare themselves for the markets and to fulfill legal requirements abroad and in Brazil. So federal government and MAPA, we want to consolidate this favorable environment so that our agriculture can fulfill the requirement of EUDR and other legislations, because we want to have a big public platform. I'm not talking about uncertainties, but certainties, because I can't accept an official instrument of the Brazilian government is questions that there are doubts. If we think about the CAR, the Environmental Rural Registry, it's an official tool. The maps of the IBG, all these are official programs, institutions, and the program to demonstrate, the produce program, it's for calculation of deforestation in the Amazon by satellite. So it's official, so there should be no doubts. So what's the challenge? Thinking about working conditions, sanitary controls, land title regularizations, and legal specificities as in the EUDR. So we have to deliver this to the Brazilian producers so that they have less work, less, so that costs less for them. It should be continually developed. It should be certified so that it attends the compliance requirements. So the platforms tries to fulfill all this. There are still some gaps, of course. One of the loopholes is the monitoring of land use in Brazil. This is done by Terra Class, developed by Embrapa, and INPE is the National Spatial Research Institute and the IBG Statistical Institute. We have it for 2 biomes, Amazon and Cerrado. It's the majority of the territory, but it's not enough. So the challenge is until the half of the year, we should have Terra Class for all of Brazil, so it can integrate our new platform, and then we will have all the main requirements so that we can show that we comply in agriculture and livestock. So this is the perspective. It's not easy work, it's complex, it's a lot of collaboration, cooperation. Our ministry is working with all the sector representatives, and I sometimes I go to the meetings of the ABIEC associations. So we have the same agenda. And so we have a lot of dialogue. I hear what Thomas Baldorf says, what he thinks about our new platform. So this is not just happening here, but also in the European Union, because we all want to guarantee, even if we have the necessity to develop, improve our platform, but that the logic behind it, that the series of information, public information, are reliable, and that we can reduce the doubts, the uncertainties in the negotiations, doubts that the traders, the operators, the importers, the exporters have, that they have it all clear on paper, so that the transportation from farm 1 to 2 to 3, you can do it in it might be a physical document, it might be electronic document, but it has to be something safe, reliable for everybody. Thank you. Thank you, Pedro Neto. You will have the opportunity to come back to continue the discussion. Now, I would like to add another aspect we discussed yesterday, and this is linked to the question of transition period. It's the remaining risks and the mitigation measures. Here, an important aspect is it's the feeling that there is a moment in time that everything is changed or will be changed. And how can we prove that it's different, that it's changed? We know that it does not work like this, because we know that the deforestation was drastically reduced recently because command and control was applied. And deforestation usually is illegal activity. It's not agriculture or livestock, but we still have some risks. So I would like to ask Fernando, Nassar, and the other colleagues that are online, because this is directly linked to the transition period, the remaining risk. How can we have 100% guarantee, or do we have leeway? What are the measures to mitigate these small risks? Because our objective is that the products are deforestation free. But I think part of the discussion about the transition period is linked to this. So Fernando, in the value chain you represent, and we heard this yesterday, what could be the measures to have better mitigation? Let's try. First, I would like to state, EUDR never asked the producer countries to develop national traceability systems. Everything goes to the private operators, to private players. They will have to demand their exporter, what's your process, what kind of due diligence do you have? So it's in the hand of the private sector. Private sector can handle this, but in order to do this and to have guarantees that there is no deforestation, that it's according to the law, I need availability of data, I need platforms that can integrate the data, capability of data analysis. So the government had this initiative of a new platform because the government wants to facilitate business environment. So we support this idea of the platform because it will make things easier. But this is one of the mitigation measures to put this in place. How can we have more reliability and transparency? So the platform is one tool, makes things easier, but we also need to recognize in Europe, we need that these databases, the platforms are accepted and recognized. And this is one of my uncertainties. So if you have an official in the port and I'm checking the documents. Now I'm looking on the other database and here it says there is deforestation on our platform. It says there is no deforestation. So what's accepted by officials on the other side? So we need certainties. We need to mitigate this kind of risks. We understand that the transition period is also a mitigation measure. It gives us more leeway, more time, and we need this time to be certain about the entire process. Now it's a partial certainty. There remain some question marks. So I believe the risk is something important to consider, to discuss, and the definition of risk. The risk in a country of the size of Brazil, so not the entire country should be placed in the same risk category. We know that it's linked to certain regions and depending on the risk, you have a due diligence process and you also have more audits. And then the importers will avoid this kind of additional work or risk. And then you might have importers that say, I don't want no products that come from everything that's located above São Paulo, or others that even say, I don't want products anymore from Brazil. This is a risk. So the regionalization of risk would also a mitigation of risk. So Tobias and Thomas, get prepared because you will come back soon. But before, Nassar, the risk question. When we think about other countries that have the same, adhere to the same legislation, Ghana, all the cacao producing countries, they also have huge difficulties, and they don't have the Brazil's platform, because here we have, but Embrapa and other Brazilian institutions will also assist African countries in this. But this might be a huge risk when you liberate the ships in the port and the official says, no, I don't know this document, I don't know this platform. Or then he says, well, you won't disembark these products. And this we heard yesterday. You might have concentration processes, verticalization processes. Fernando said everything that's above São Paulo is out, or the entire of Brazil is out, or just soy from the US, soy from Argentina. So we will have changes of experts of the market, and this is worrisome for ABIOF. And how are you treating and discussing this? Yes, I have 3 remaining risks listed here. And each one of them, I have a comment for Thomas, if he agrees. And maybe he could also comment it. First, the frontiers controls, and this is one of the things we are worried about. the customs, and if the authority from Germany could talk to our private sector as soon as possible. We have to define processes, documents that are needed, and how to prove things, and what the competent authority expects of us, so we don't have problems at the customs, as Fernando mentioned. Soja is a bulk product. Can we work with the following concept? Due diligence, you have to have a risk assessment. Can we work with the following concept? It's 100% deforestation free, but in my chain, I have a calculated risk of 1 or 2% or 3%, and I'm mitigating this risk. Here are my measures. So in spite of this risk, I don't have this kind of soy in my value chain. Would this be acceptable to the competent authority in Europe, in Germany? And this could be developed thinking about the residual negligible risk that we already have in the legislation. And the other one is the anonymization question. Pedro mentioned the platform, and one of the wonderful functionalities of the platform is that it implements the possibility of a barcode for the different producing plots of land. I don't know if this is the competent authority. I think it's the European Commission. If the Commission accepts that instead of the importer uploads the plots of land in the information system, he would upload barcodes representing the geographical coordinates, and the competent authorities could verify this information from the barcode, so we wouldn't share sensible data. This is possible. Is this possible? And this is the three aspects I would like to stress. Thank you. Now, Thomas, I just would like to add something. Nasser said 100% deforestation free, but residual risk of 1–2%. And at a certain moment, eliminate all the risk, all the residual risk. So this is a transition period tending to zero in a short term of time. How long? First, it's small, 1–3% and of risk. And if we think about 3–4 years, I think this is what we need. Now, Thomas, he's hearing everything. We have a translation, simultaneous translation. Thomas doesn't solve this, but he can give us his opinion, so that we have also the contact to the competent authority in Germany and the associations, and if things evolve well with Germany and our activities are going in the right way. So this might be a reference also for other countries. So Thomas, we talked about this at other moments, but we have new developments. So maybe let's hear your opinion. Please, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you very much. And Nasser, thank you very much for those questions. I assume I will get some additional minutes for them because I have to spend some time on it to explain it. But first of all, perhaps to address them, allow me to differentiate two processes, because in the previous discussion we had a bit of overlaps of those two processes. First of all, the operator, who is the first one importing any or placing products on the market, he's the one who has to, let's say, upload those informations into this currently developed information system of the EU Commission. There's a list in the regulation what information needs to be uploaded. It's I'm just going through it. It's who has placed something. So what is the something and kilograms, and those the relevant product numbers of this system, and places this this relevant product on the EU market, and where does it come from. So those are the informations, and then the statement that those products are deforestation free. So the regulation itself says that the operator shall not place relevant products on the market unless he or she can exercise due diligence, that this due diligence has revealed a non-negligible risk that the relevant products are not compliant. There's a lot of not in those sentences, but please allow me to rephrase it. You can place relevant products on the market as long as you can guarantee that there's no risk, no non-negligible risk that it is without deforestation. Okay. The other process is the process of the benchmarking, the so-called benchmarking. The benchmarking is a tool, a three-tier system with the aim of assessing countries and parts thereof. This is very important, and it goes back to a German introduction into this text, that how those countries or parts thereof are interpreted by clear criteria, scientific criteria in terms of deforestation. The list is in this in the regulation itself. So of course it could be that complete countries would be addressed or benchmarked or assessed in the system, or only parts thereof. I think this is very crucial. But this in fact has not so much to do with this first process where the operator needs to fulfill the due diligence. It's rather how much assessments, controls the competent authorities of the EU member states will do. So this is an important issue that I just wanted to say. And of course, then coming to those three questions from Nassar. So first, I think this workshop and today is one of those milestones and landmark events. And to be very honest, the Brazilian embassy in Berlin contacted us to organize exactly what Nassar just has proposed. And we were absolutely keen to have this bilateral exchange of our custom authority and the relevant Brazilian stakeholders. But what we said is, please allow us to first conclude with yesterday's and today's workshop, because a lot of information and perhaps misinterpretations have been are out there that we want to somehow address. And I think there are two misinterpretations. The first one is on operators of the EU. Exactly. So there are operators in the EU that let's say a German forester also has to comply with the regulation. Exactly like Tobias Fier said, the German cattle breeder will have to do as well. So it goes for all of us, this regulation. And I'm really relieved that in the EU the forest area is increasing since centuries, more so to say. So that was one something where it was a bit unclear yesterday. And today I heard that in Germany or in EU we have been eating horse meat. So this goes back, I think, a long time. So it was not only decades but also centuries ago. That was customary, yes. But I think the most recent event was that there was a lasagna found with horse meat and has to be removed from the market. So I can guarantee you that, and I think Tobias Fier will state this as well, that in Germany you have never eaten horse meat if you did not want to eat horse meat. So just allow me to get this straight. It's impossible to not comment on this one. So the second issue that Nassar said about bulk products, and I'm phrasing it in one terminology. I think this is very well known. It's mass balance. So mass balance per se is not excluded from this EU regulation, but you have to be 100% sure that there is a non-negligible risk that the product is compliant with the regulation. So I have to state that even if it's 1 or 3%, this is not non-negligible. So mass balance in this term cannot be applied as in the current regulation. Now coming to the third one, the anonymized platform, and I really was very much delighted to see this in the report that we heard this morning by both our colleagues. As far as I understood it, it's really very much interesting. It's one of the main highlights I really highlighted in the preparation for today's meeting. Is that the information is there. Not everyone throughout the chain will see it, but everyone will know it is there. And then the operator, who is the one who has to upload the information into the information system, uploads the information that is needed. So from my side, this is absolutely in conformity with the regulation, because the regulation only applies to the operator, who has to know where the product has been produced and can counter check if it's on deforested land or not. So from my side, I'm really keen to take this to those relevant organizing colleagues in Brussels, and to propose something like this as a very good approach. And allow me to complement this with one of those issues I really wanted to raise today, because I see a lot really positive evolving from yesterday and today. And I know that we are having a very open exchange platform in Brussels on this EUDR, on this EU deforestation regulation. It's called an EU platform on deforestation. And the EU Commission is organizing it. And Brazil is one of those major participants, and really going into the nitty-gritty as well, into the regulation itself. And I think it would be really worth thinking about if this exchange and the interchange today and the results of it, just like the one that Nassar just proposed, could be presented. Perhaps also the system that my colleague from MAPA, Veroneto, had just explained. This would be terrific, really, to show how far Brazil is ahead of this work. Not only on EUDR, please don't understand me wrong, not only on EUDR, but also on the fight on deforestation on a global scale. This is really impressive and could be a milestone presentation at this platform. And it would help, of course, cross-learning between the sectors, but also between those countries of production. Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas. This was the first panel that we had, and we see that we have two axes, parallel axes that converge. We have the private sector and the governments under the watch of civil society in Brazil and the European Union. Thomas mentioned about the embassy in Berlin. We had there our attaché Jaguaribe, and we have been conducting activities. I don't know if Eduardo Sampaio is listening to us. He's always with us. And here in Brasilia, Donald Moore is the attaché for agricultural matters for Germany, and there is an axis of discussion with him in relationship to the EU. But I would like to call on Tobias again, because this matter of negligible risk on the perspective of the importers, we have to tackle this also. So we have government, the EU, Brazil, Mercosur, but we have also the access of the market and the operators, importers, and producers. Tobias, this negligible risk is part of the transaction. The importers and operators would be willing to will be assuming this risk together with the exporters here from the Global South. And finally, we wouldn't like to talk about horse meat and the lasagna, since we eat a lot of lasagna in Germany. Hopefully, we will not see this in the Italian restaurants in Germany ever. But jokes aside, Tobias, negligible risk. Have you been discussing this? Can we share this risk? Or is this a matter from the exporter? Is this a matter from the producer? What would you say?
Thank you very much for the question. Well, one thing I learned about risk, maybe that's not quite right. It's more about probabilities, but there's never a zero probability of something happening. So there's always, as much as work as you do, there's always a risk that something goes wrong, that something is misinterpreted. But I think that in the regulation itself, as it is phrased, I think it's been mentioned before, the regulation does not impose any obligation on exporters. So effectively, as it stands, all the risk is assumed by the importer in this specific case. So I'm sure there's some agreements that can be made. Again, it is very much down to the implementation of every single operator, how they do this, how they agree with their partners to share the risk. But in the end, by a law side, it is down to the importer to burden that risk, to take that risk. But in the end, to mitigate this risk, I think it is good to think about systems or measures that make people want to participate in them, and that do not create so much friction that it becomes so restrictive, so hard, so difficult to trade with Europe, that people are just going to shy away and look for other partners in the rest of the world. So therefore, I think, as I've mentioned before, things need to develop and the systems need to be created, and they need to be created in a sense and way that conforms to the local realities, that includes smallholders and allows them access and doesn't build a wall for them that makes them shy away and maybe only has the big players left in the market. Thank you.
Yes, please. I believe Tobias brings some very important points. Nassar talked about transition. And if we look at the cattle chain, the information that exists already, we can deliver, as I said, we can be compliant to the EUDR in part of the production cycle, and we can think about how we can measure points at the beginning of the cycle so that we can reach zero risk. So we have something already to deliver, and we have to think as how to comply with the rest of the cycle. I believe that this can be built between importers and exporters. But again, I would like to come back to the risk at the customs office. Who will tell the customs office that an agreement has been made between importers and exporters? And I believe this is the role of the EU. The EU has to say these agreements are fine. This is something that has to be worked with officially at negotiation tables. And I wouldn't like to go back to the horse meat, but I brought this anecdote up because in 2008, we had the European Directive 08, and that reduced the Brazilian exports, and that was a break in our commercial balance. We wouldn't like to see this again because this isn't good for anyone, and that generates exclusion. And we know that EUDR does not want to exclude small producers. So that's why we have to negotiate on this, on the risk. Thank you very much. Yes, again, although the private sector can advance in sharing risks, we know that the last word remains beyond the private sector. So this is why it is important to have our platform and other initiatives. I would like to pass on the word to Pedro, and we have 80 participants, and Eduardo Sampaio is also with us from Berlin. Eduardo Sampaio, we have much to do. And he's sending me messages, said Pedro. He would like to join the conversation also. Eduardo Sampaio in Berlin, you will have much work to do. Pedro, the platform is being seen as a hope and a part of the solution. We know that we don't have easy answers for hard questions, for difficult questions, and you bring to us huge optimism when you say that you don't want to talk about uncertainties, but certainties. You said you can aggregate much data. This will increase with time. And this gives us hope that this, together with information systems of the European Union, from exporters and operators, that this could lead to juridical legal security for the markets, and that we won't have bigger problems. Please, can you share with us what measures and how far you see this? You have been in Brussels. We will have a delegation of the EU in Brazil next week. So do you have good news to share with us? Yes, in fact, the dialogue around the tool Agro Plus has to be balanced and has to be put forward in two fronts. Here, along with the productive sector has to see in the mechanisms of the platform its own specifications, or it has to see itself in the platform, and the Brazilian government has the expectation to deliver the platform in its phase 1 and 2 on the 24th of July 2024. So I would like to answer to two questions. One of them is that we have Plano Safra 2024-2025. We would like to incentivize good practices by rendering incentives and credit lines, and the anti-deforestation legislation. This is something that we're working on. We would like to keep on dialoguing, but I see that this dialogue has to be balanced, I would say. And we see that our role as government is to create a favorable climate for all partners to dialogue, to get in touch with each other. The dialogue has to be objective here at home in Brazil, but also with international stakeholders. So we had already dialogues with Germany, Russia, EU, US, with China, but also with bloc representatives. So at the end of the year, in November, we were in Brussels and had a wonderful conversation with the team of the EU. On Monday, we will have a delegation of the EU here, and we'll strengthen our talks so that we can tackle all these matters. And I will talk with you next week about the anonymization. We will tackle the matter of data protection. This is also very important. Our law is very strict in Brazil. So our official platforms such as Agro Brazil will, of course, respect our data protection law. There will be no illegality in data transactions. So as when I talked to you that and said that the operator would need to organize papers, I was talking about the barcodes that we are going to generate. So this dialogue should be broadened, not only the international dialogue. I see a need to talk internally. Renata Miranda is in dialogues with the representatives of the coffee industry, with other industries. And so, as you can see, we are motivated, but we see we have deadlines and we have to comply by them. I'm sorry, I cannot hear the audio. I believe the mic is not working. Thank you, Pedro. I would like to give the floor. I would like to correct myself. We don't have 80 participants online. No, we have 251 participants online, and that is a record for us. The last time we had 180 participants, and today we have 251 participants. They are all very important to us, and Eduardo Sampaio from Berlin also tuned here. So Nassar, would you like, please, to have the floor and do a comment? Of course. Thomas, I'm sorry to insist on this debate. Thomas, you said that the embassy in Berlin asked for a bilateral meeting with BLE, with the authority, and you suggested them to wait for the event here. Well, the event here is at the end, so I would like to ask to you to insist on this idea. I'd like to insist on this idea. Abiovi, many farmers would like to discuss technical and operational matters. Thomas, if you could help the request of the Embassy of Berlin to speed up the talks, perhaps in the bilateral talks, we will reach to the conclusion that the implementation will bring difficulties. So the member states can press the EU to seek for transitional time so as to see how the implementation will be in the different state members. So we have to have an exploratory meeting with each other to initiate this debate with the government of Brazil, the private sector, and other stakeholders in Europe.
Thank you. This is very concrete. I would move on to Fernanda and to others because we have several issues. Please raise your hand or send your questions. Ricardo Andrado, the Ingo Plöger from Abage, and others, and Caroli from, you're all already here on our list. We try to be very democratic, but it's still open. And we also have another system for online participation, and we will explain. We also have our partner and friend, Marcelo Morandi from Embrapa. He is at Embrapa following us here. Thank you for participating. Yes, Carlos. You can also use Slido to hand in questions, but The discussion is also in the chat, and we have several important and interesting comments. But let's start the Q&A with a question from the audience here. Then we move on to Slido and so forth. Perfect. For those that are online, you can use the barcode, and the password is hashtag EUDR29. So for those already enrolled, those that already sent the questions, please. And Carol will assist us here. We need the microphone.
Muito obrigado.
Thank you.
Discussão mostrou
The discussion
preocupação
showed that people are worried,
possibilidade de trazermos
that there
os
is a
problemas
possibility
concretos
that we
junto
have
às
concrete
autoridades,
problems, and that
europeias
we
no
have to
discernimento.
discuss these concrete problems
queria
with the European
perguntar,
authorities that
principalmente
might
aos nossos colegas
not have foreseen this.
europeus,
So I would like to point out to our colleagues in Europe
se eles estão a par da
and ask them
sensibilidade,
if they are aware of
complexidade que
the
nós
sensitivity
trouxemos
and
hoje
the
aqui.
complexity of
O
the
André
issues
mostrou
that are being
claramente,
discussed
dentro da
here.
cadeia de custódia,
André showed the problems of the chain of custody and the
iminente que nós
difficulty
temos
and the problems, the
na
imminent
parte da
problems
soja,
we
por
might
ser
have in
exportação de grãos,
soya, because
não são todos
this
os
is
portos
in bulk
europeus
exportation.
que vão fazer
Not
a
all the
exportação.
ports in
São
Europe
poucos.
handle this type of
Então,
produce. It's just a
trabalho
few
com estas
ports.
autoridades que
So
sabem
we
como
have to
fazer
work
a
with
importação de
these
grãos e
authorities
a
that
questão
know how to
é uma questão
import
estratégica
bulk
fundamental,
produce.
tendo em vista
So
que a
this is a
estrutura
fundamental
4 ou 5
strategy.
portos na
So it's
Europa
3
que
or
são
4 ports in
representativos.
Europe that are relevant.
Totalmente diferente é a
Completely
questão da
different
carne,
is
que o
the
Fernando
issues
apontou,
with
que é
meat
exportado em
mentioned by
contêineres
Fernando.
refrigerados.
Meat is exported
E aí eu
in
tenho uma
cooled
imensidão de
containers,
portos na Europa
and
onde
here
eu
we
posso
have
estar colocando.
many ports in
Nós
Europe where
aprendemos
they might
ontem
go to.
que a
Yesterday, we
regulamentação
learned
europeia
that the
será
European
traduzida para
regulation will
27
be translated
diferentes
into
idiomas,
27
com
different languages.
possibilidades de 27
And
interpretações diferentes.
you might have
Em
the
uma, eu chamaria
27
centena de
different
portos que
interpretations,
poderão
and you have
ter
hundreds of
diferenciados.
ports with
Então, são
different
problemas de outras
translations.
dimensões que
So
poderão
this,
estar ocorrendo.
the
A
dimensions
gente
are
está
huge.
colocando esse tema. Eu gostaria muito de ouvir
So I would
como
like
vocês
really to
na
hear
Europa
from
estão
you
tentando
how you
gerenciar
in
isso.
Europe are
Porque
trying
imagine
to
se
manage and
dentro de
handle this.
país é percebido
So
que uma interpretação é mais rigorosa do que o outro.
if we have a stricter
Ou do que um
interpretation
está
in one
fazendo uma
country
outra circunstância. Vai
compared to
haver esse
another,
tipo de
or
comércio.
that you have
Então, nós vemos
different
esse risco.
interpretation
Gostaríamos
in the
muito de
ports.
entender este risco.
So we would like to understand more about this risk. I would like to suggest we will hear the 3 questions. Please write them down, and then we will have the answers. So next question. Hi, thank you, Carlos. Really pragmatic question. Andrea and others mentioned the transition period and the importance. But what would be the transition period that the 2 sectors really need? Do you have an idea, a proposal? Thank you. Next question. Hi there, everybody. It's important to mention, and we talked about this yesterday and pointed out that there are several things and solutions, public solutions that exist in Brazil. They are free. For example, in the state of Pará, in Maranhão, in Minas Gerais for coffee, for planted forest, but also for soy, and the traceability of cattle in the state of Pará and others. We understand the importance of a national platform because this will make things easier. So business transaction can be carried out smoothly, but this takes time. Implementation takes time. It's official public systems that are ready to run tests, to have the dry runs with anonymized data. So we have concrete examples of loopholes and gaps, so we can make the improvements that are necessary. But we have solutions in Brazil in place that can be improved, scaled up, so we can work on them together. We can show social environmental conformity and also the legality and no deforestation for the majority of the properties and farms in Brazil. Thank you. Ricardo, please, microphone. Yes, please. Good morning. I represent the leather sector. Fernando stressed this quite well. We are worried. We have specificities in our sector because when we talk about exports of meat to Europe, it's something about 1,000 farms that have the credentials. When we're talking about leather, it's about 2.5 million farms that might exporting these products. This is another difference, the impact of 3% that's exported to Europe. This is meat. In leather sector, 30% of the leather exports go to Europe. So our question is, many of the importers are demanding an individual traceability of the leather. And we went to Europe last year, and it was mentioned it would not be mass balance, so it would not be traceability by batch. This is a huge challenge, as Fernando explained, integration of data bank, availability of data, also considering data protection legislation. So we might have an additional problem if we have to identify the hides individually, and we don't have this kind of system in Brazil for the individual animals. It's being discussed in the ministry and in the associations, of course, but we don't have this policy yet. So how can I deliver this kind of traceability of the hide if the animal is not identified? So today we have this challenge. The leather industry has all the conditions. If we receive an animal at the meat packer and it has an ear tag and you have individual information about the animal, so the leather sector is prepared to deliver this information at the end of the process and prove that the produce is free of deforestation. But if we don't get this information, we can't deliver it. And we have to understand if it's the system by batch or it's individualized, and that we try to improve the compliance. So we export over 10 million to Europe. If this is not solved, we will have a rupture. Numbers will go down drastically, and exports will go elsewhere to China, to Taiwan, and so forth. And the products might also come to the European market by other means from other countries, because I can export my hides to China and they can use this hide and process it and place it in cars, and Europe imports the cars with the Brazilian leather. So mass balance, question mark, we might have problems, a disruption of exports and imports. We are making research about the impacts to try to solve these conundrums, because all our production goes through tanneries, but we are also thinking about the possibility of not using the leather. It would be really bad also for the environment if we place it in the earth instead of using the leather. We have milk, we have meat, so leather is a byproduct. So it would make no sense to have all this neither commercially nor thinking about all the other consequences. Thank you, Ricardo. Last one is Mauro, and then we will move on to the answers. Eduardo Sampaio from Berlin is trying to connect, and yes, and you will have to give us the signal for, so we can also give you the floor. Please, Mauro. Yes, as I'm here close by, next to Pedro, because Pedro, you mentioned that 24th July we will have the platform. It will be delivered, but we know that it's planned. 3 phases are planned, and traceability, total traceability is in the 3rd phase for livestock. So 24th of July, it's the platform with the 3 phases, or which phase will you deliver, or when will we reach the 3rd phase, the full cycle, because this is linked to what Fernando mentioned. EUDR didn't ask us to have a platform, but we think this is wonderful here in Brazil. But we need more information. And when can we have this information? I'm Mauro from Amigos da Terra. And now we will try. Ingo Plöger mentioned the harbors, Carol, the transition period that is necessary. Felipe Nunes talked about other solutions, regional solutions. Ricardo about the leather sector and the risks, important market for Brazil and also for the European Union. And Mauro, when the platform and the traceability will be functional. Sorry? So he asked about the 3rd phase of the traceability of the platform. So maybe we'll first have Thomas Baldorf and then Tobias. They are online, because Ingo Plöger's questions is related to EU regulation and the different ports, and also the guy at the customs, which is really important, how he will handle the situation. But please, you can also make other comments. Maybe we start with Thomas Baldorf. Please, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you very much. And you even forgot one, because the first one was Andre Nassar. He said, he asked me explicitly on the meeting we could arrange, right? So I'll start with that one. So Andre, exactly. So what we wanted in terms of efficiency was to have today's event awaited, but be assured there's no time pressing. Additional to this issue, we will really try to engage with you and with the embassy on the spot and try to arrange a meeting of our BLE. BLE stands for Bundesamt für Landwirtschaft und Ernährung, who is responsible in Germany for the checks and controls of this regulation, just for the others to know. So that's absolutely no problem. To Ingo Plöger, you asked about the 27 member states and possible diverse interpretations. Allow me just to state one issue. The first one is two issues. The first one is the regulation itself is quite complex. I admit this. It's quite long, but this is one part of it. Is because we dealt with this quite intense work on this regulation to guarantee to have this level playing field. So all those critical issues are in there in each of the 27 translations. And be assured, it's not the first regulation in EU we have. So that's usual process in EU. It's nothing different than for all other regulations we are dealing with since EU was founded. So rest assured, we know what we do, and those translations, translators are very good in the EU, and we really have a perfect system to guarantee that those translations are in fact all the same in their meaning. So that's how we handle it. And I'm seeing the question on the ports. I'm following the chat a bit, and my Portuguese is not so fluently anymore. But there's one question or one answer in English. It comes from my Dutch colleagues, so greetings to the Netherlands, and they say they will do a test run, as far as I understood it, in Rotterdam about soy and the bulk product. So just to announce this here, allow me this for another member state. The third question was on leather and mass balance, and please allow me to elaborate a bit on it. I was being quite strict on my interpretation of the possibility to use mass balance, but please don't understand it in a way that you need identity preserved data to be compliant with the regulation. This is not at all in the regulation itself. It can be, yes, but it's not at all in the regulation itself. So working with batches is possible, and you have to be in a position to state that there's no risk in terms of no negligible risk, that the the relevant products have been grown, harvested, obtained, or raised on relevant plots of land, or in terms of cattle on establishments that are somehow connected with deforestation. I do see one other issue in the chat, I think, on the reference map, but I think time is flying, so I will put this to the table back if you want to discuss this reference map and issue. So I'm ready to do so, of course. Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas. Tobias, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. I will try to answer the questions that I can answer. First, regarding the sensitivity, and if we realize here in Europe how sensitive it is, I will say I will never get tired of mentioning this, because I think it gets mentioned way too little. In the end, this is a regulation that also applies to all of our own production. So if you ask about the sensitivity, we are very aware here, at least, about the sensitivity, because our farmers, our slaughterhouses, they have no other choice. They have to either market it here in Europe or export from it, and this can only be done EUDR compliant. So not to belittle the sensitivity for the EU third countries, but in the end, yes, the sensitivity is given, it's understood. However, not through the whole chain, I would say. Like this issue around it, how it applies to us, our own production, gets overlooked in a lot of instances. So it has to keep being mentioned. Regarding the different interpretation in the ports or member states, I mentioned an example yesterday. The level playing field is nothing that should be new through the EUDR. The level playing field and the uniform application of EU regulations should be given anyway. For example, the animal health law. However, sometimes it is the case that if I call different ports, if I call different authorities in the same member state itself, I get very subtle differences in interpretation on the same laws there as well, and therefore also maybe 3 or 4 different ways of working. So the risk is totally still there, even if it is in focus, that we see at least that there will be slightly different ways of working per member state and even within the member states themselves. And the last question that I can answer here, I think, is regarding the type of transition period that we think. I think I've mentioned it before. What we need in that first step where the regulation becomes applicable is we need to be able to learn. As it states right now, we fear that the regulation forces importers, anyone, to immediately break off any relationship because it is forbidden. If they can't prove it without the shadow of a doubt that it is deforestation free. So we need to have that first phase when the application starts to learn, to improve the systems that are there. And that is kind of the fundamental part of the transition period, I think. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I would like to give the floor to Fernando. We had some contributions in the chat, and then we'll come to the last round of words with the colleagues here at the table. I would like to start by the questions of the chat. Now we have 2 questions. One about due diligence. What is the model of due diligence? Is there a pattern, a standard of information that has to be validated, and where can we find this information, this specific information? This is one question. The second question has to do with, and I will proceed in English. This has to do with negligible risks and how this can be elaborated on. And Carlos, 2 last comments that were brought in the chat. Fernando Zellner from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, he says that there will be additional costs for producers with the legislation. And he talked about the possibility of exclusion of small producers. And he raised also the question of raising costs for the final consumer. When should the Brazilian producer do not sell to the EU will bear additional costs or the consumer in Europe will have more costs for his meat or product. So these were the questions that were raised. Thank you very much. Fernando Zellner is a very important partner. He's at the Embassy at Buenos Aires, and I thank him for his participation. Is Eduardo with us? Eduardo, you will have the floor, but please be short in your words. And once you get to Berlin, please buy a round of beer to us. Eduardo, you have the floor. How do you do? Yes, I will be very succinct. And of course, I will buy a round of beer. I will read out my comment, my provocation in a very high speed. So do not interpret me wrong, Thomas and Tobias. We have many uncertainties in the application of the law, including the private sector in Germany has issued an open letter about this. And the legislation as it is, although it could guarantee that the European consumer does not consume deforested products, it does not guarantee the combat of deforestation. And the norm, without any question, it can contribute to the concentration of the chain and can exclude small farmers. And I've talked to many importers here in Germany. I understand that we could come together in the sector in Germany, that we could improve traceability and the control of raw material, and the platform AgroPlus Sustainable, as Thomas has recognized. It is a very robust platform and could help us. But again, we need time to implement it. So my provocation is, would it be possible, or would it be desirable to review the time of implementation? Our calves are already born. They can, of course, be traced, but those that exist already, they would fall off the legislation. So could we review the time for the applicability of the law, or could we review some issues of the law so that we can adapt to it? I don't want answers right now. I just want to leave this provocation so that we can reflect with each other. So I would like to rear to conclusion, and I would like to give the floor to Nassar. Here we have two of our experts. I will answer then the question of Caroli. Is it okay? Ingo was here, and I had talked to him before that. I talked about 3 plus 3. So 3% negligible risk for 3 years. When I talk about negligible risk, Thomas, if I understood him right, he understood it as mass balance. So we had some difficulties on evolving on this. Thomas, we recognize that we don't have mass balance. Exporters have said this. We don't have mass balance. In the risk analysis, would it be acceptable to have a risk of up till 3% of negligible risk with the right mitigation measures? So, and Eduardo brought another point to the table. Would it be possible to postpone the applicability of the law? My suggestion is a flexibility, 3 plus 3, but this is something that has to be talked in our national institutions. But of course, we have to think about the postponement of the applicability of the law. Thank you very much, Nassar, for your participation here. Fernando, you have the floor. I've jotted down some points, and I would like to address them very briefly. As to transition, we understand this 2 ways. A transition in the way Tobias proposed it. We have a learning on the norm to understand how the norm works, be it from the side of the operators, of the institutions. So of course we need this learning time so that everyone learns how to deal with the norm, how to deal with the instruments of the norm. But when I talk about specifically of transition for cattle ranching and for cattle products, we're talking about a transition from partial traceability to the complete control of the cycle. And I understand that this has to be equivalent to the cycle of production. A slaughtered animal is slaughtered at 30 months of age. So the meat that is exported to Europe is already there. So from January on, I will need 2 and a half, 3 years to have traceability from the beginning of the cycle. And as we talked about due diligence, I see procedures in the industry that are already implemented. We have the protocol of Buena Linha. We have developed this protocol to monitor social environmental criteria at the beginning, and I believe this is the basis to generate reliability and compliance to the EUDR. And this is what we have done at the private sector. And of course, if we have a governmental platform, this would complement what we're doing. So one thing is to monitor properties to see if criteria are being met, and the other thing is to have information on traceability rooted at the government so that we can present the whole cycle of animal production. As to the comment from UFMG, of course, there are farmers that don't have ear tag their animals, but we have transit information. Those information pieces are not available. So we have to understand how to use this transit information and bring new proposals so that to integrate this information. And of course, as to costs, of course, we will have costs in the chain. If we had full traceability, we will have other costs, segregated chains will have additional costs, and the EU is willing to bear the price, I understand. But what I see is that we have to understand better how the law will be implemented so we can respond to it. Thank you very much. Before I give the floor to Pedro for his final words, I would like, on behalf of the organization, I would like to thank, we have now over 300 participants on site and online. This is a very significant number. And I believe we're doing our part to disseminate information, uncertainties and certainties, and we are on the right path. I'm very sure of it. I would like to thank Ingo and Gleice, our collaborators here at APD. Ingo, our director here, but I would like also to thank Fernanda Martinelli, Jan Brunner, both from the University of Bonn, and also our colleagues from the Federal University of Minas Gerais, the technicians, the translators. Without translations, things do not work. So thank you for your contribution. And 2 extra pieces of information in our website, apd.com.br. We have all of our information, and you will have access to a video from this activity also in our YouTube channel. So we will be able to access many more participants in our site. We have articles and posts, and so I would like to encourage you to visit our website. And finally, a final information, you're all invited to keep on discussing with us in the realm of the Mercosur. We will be in Puerto Iguaçu soon with colleagues from Argentina, Uruguay, and Paraguay. So we have our offices in Argentina and in Uruguay, and we'll get together in the realm and discuss this in the realm of Mercosur. So we will humbly get together at Mercosur terms and understand where we're at and what we're doing. And I understand that we'll be able to have fruitful conversations there. So we have to tackle these problems together. So if we would like to join us there, please be welcome to talk to us and see if you can join us. I would like to thank you very much, and I would like to close my participation here and give the floor to Mr. Pedro Neto for his last words. Thank you very much, Carlos Alberto. I would like to thank again for the opportunity of being here to talk to you. And I would like to greet our friends in Germany, Thomas Bad from with the Ministry of Food and Agriculture, but also Tobias, who has been accompanying us. It's very nice to talk to you. Carlos Alberto has said how wide this discussion is, and Thomas talked about transparency and lightness of our climate. And I think this is something that we have to highlight. The conversations around the EUDR have to be dealt with this way. This doesn't mean it is easy, but the good thing is that we talk to each other. And I would like to stress 2 points. I received one question, and then I would like to talk about the transition time. So firstly, the platform comprises 3 phases. On the 24th of July, we will deliver phase 1 and 2, and phase 3 is the phase of traceability. We will talk about the Plano Safra in July, so we will render incentives for farmers, and we will keep on working on traceability. So we have partial traceability, and we have been discussing also the temporal period, or the temporal or the time for has been settled to make major advancements in the combat on deforestation. So we expect to be able to follow this dialogue with having our platforms ready to answer the questions of this legislation. As to our internal legislation, we have to make some adaptations, but the idea is to have the platform ready to answer the expectations of the EUDR. Second point, transition. I have to agree with Fernando here. We would need at least one production cycle as a transition time so that we can ear tag our animals, so that we can rear our animals. And this can also be applicable to soybean production. The contracts that are already in place, they cannot suffer the impact of a legislation that came afterwards. So we have to make means of preserving and respecting existing contracts, existing cycles of production. I understand this is very important, and it is very important to discuss this. Our position is to discuss this as a key point to keep on discussing. On Monday, we will have a very important discussion with the representation of the EU. So we'll have a delegation here, and we will keep on discussing and modeling a good solution to present to the EU in this regard. So thank you again for this opportunity. The greatness of our platform is that we do not intend that it becomes an instrument of ownership of our federal government. The idea is that it works in favor for the cattle industry, for the cattle production, in terms of governance, in terms of laws, in terms of platforms. We want to add to the production, to the sector. We don't want to own the platform. We don't want to take the credit for it. We want it to work for the producers, want it to work for the society. Thank you, Carlos Alberto, for being here. And I always wanted to do something that I'm going to do now. I would like to end this meeting today. So I declare it ended, and I would like to invite you all for lunch with me. This is something I always wanted to do.